After the premiere of George Lucas's first Star Wars film in 1977, fans were ready for the saga to continue. Join us as we reflect on the magical days between the first two movies and the excitement surrounding the release of the very first Star Wars sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, in May of 1980. One of the best parts about growing up during the time of the original Star Wars trilogy is that once the original film ended, anything could have happened. Darth Vader went flying out into space, the heroes had won, and you could play any adventure because there was nothing to follow up with. You could go by the Marvel comics if you wanted to. There was a book called Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which continued the adventures of Luke and Leia. There were Han Solo novels, but as far as the imagination could go, you could just make up whatever story you wanted to. It didn't really matter.
I don't know, that time was magical because anything was possible. We imagined anything could happen. The interim years were probably the most fun out of all of these years.
One of the most amazing things is I went to a haunted house in the area, and it was a March of Dimes haunted house. And they recreated the Leia hologram projection.
Wow.
They recreated the Vader and Obi-Wan lightsaber battle. And they recreated the cantina scene. It had such an effect. It was in haunted houses.
Back in those days, you could sit as long as you wanted and watch the same film with multiple viewings.
But movies played for more than a year. There wasn't as many movies back in those days. And so they just kept playing it. And so we just went all the time.
Seeing it in 77 until the premiere of Return of the Jedi, I saw him 53 times in the theater.
I even remember when I went to school and we played Star Wars, I was C-3PO, but then I was doing like C-3PO with a lightsaber or some stupid thing like that, you know.
We would do little things like, I remember we would have lightsaber duels with broomsticks. And so you use what you have, you know, and we had little squirt guns and we recreate, you know, the hallway scene and all this. My buddy had actually a movie camera. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I didn't. And so what we did is we created the hokiest kind of, we did an animation of a ship flying toward and away from the camera. And it was just, it would move like this, but it was like, this is what, you know, Lucas did and his team. This is what they did. I mean, a lot better, but it was just really, we wanted to emulate what we saw.
There were comic books, there were comic strips, there were magazine articles, there was the record that had the soundtrack on it. The story of Star Wars, which was actually the actual movie condensed down to one record album.
It was really an amazing time. You know, I went into a comic book shop and just kind of happened in there. And this guy had, I guess, you know, to promote, they sent out a bunch of cardboard copies of the soundtrack cover. And so he cut a bunch out to make this kind of 3D Star Wars little things where he would set and to promote the film. Well, that was all I needed. And I remember I had to make a decision. Do I get the big comic book or do I get the Star Wars album book, which had all the kind of influences and paintings? And I bought the album.
I think I had the big comics of Star Wars,
yes.
You know, those big.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember bringing those in all the time. I remember we would use the Marvel comics because that was the only thing. Like the first story with Han Solo and those bounty hunters and stuff. Like I didn't respond to that as well as the movie. Like I read them and I thought they were okay, but it didn't. You know, I was hoping. I think in a way I was hoping that wasn't the direction. Maybe I mean I was probably too young to think like that, but I always just kind of remember not really liking. You know, not like I read 1 or 2 or 3 issues and then I would just kind of skip over it.
I had the bubblegum cards. I remember putting all my cards in a little shoebox or something. You know, I had all the sets. There was yellow and the blue and the red and all that. I remember the shirts that said Darth Vader lives.
Which they misspelled, I think, too.
It's Darth Vader, watch out! And he's got a lightsaber.
It's Kenner's Star Wars action figures, each sold separately.
I can't think of, like, we had toys and stuff, but this was like something very specific. I remember I had C-3PO. There wasn't very many when they first came out, so I only had C-3PO and R2 for the longest time. And then I think the following Christmas I got the Death Star and Luke, and we started getting more of them because they were so cheap, right? Weren't they like $2.50?
I'd met a classmate of mine in February of 1978 in the street who said to me, hey, they've got the Star Wars figures on sale, 2 for $5 at this store a few blocks away. So we went over and I got my first 2, which were Han and Chewbacca.
2 for $5, $2.50 each. What a bargain!
Yeah.
And the first 4 that I got was Darth, a stormtrooper, Han, Chewbacca, and a land speeder.
And a land speeder. Oh wow, you got fancy.
We went there like 3 times that one day. I know I still have the Luke, the Vader, and the Obi-Wan with the telescopic lightsaber. It was some weird thing where the lightsaber would kind of come out, but then there was another little lightsaber that came out at the end. Because we would play Star Wars a lot with the Star Wars figures. My character, because I had a Luke and Tony had a Luke, my Luke had to be Mark. He couldn't be Luke because Tony's Luke was Luke.
Didn't get the X-Wing until later. They didn't get a TIE fighter until even after that.
I didn't really so much play with them as much as pose them because unlike other toys, these were not dolls. They were action figures.
Speak for yourself, buddy. I played them. All right, this 13-year-old was still an 8-year-old sometimes when it came to his action figures, and I made a crappy cardboard Millennium Falcon that when we jumped into hyperspace, my X-Wing flew into the engine, and that's when they went off into hyperspace.
I was more of a book guy.
Okay.
I liked reading the stories and seeing the artwork. McQuarrie was just amazing. To sit down with Lucas, and Lucas said, okay, there's this metal planet and there's these X-Wing kind of ships, and McQuarrie said, I got it.
I started collecting all sorts of articles about the movie at that point. I was very interested in the production of its sequel. I had heard that there was going to be a sequel and that it was going to take place on a jungle planet and on an ice planet. So that was the only information that we got. Usually the information that we got at that time came from a magazine called Starlog.
Starlog was kind of my Comic-Con in between, which turned out to be A New Hope, to Empire Strikes Back. Mm-hmm. Because all the Star Wars fans had their address printed in the letter section. And so we would start to kind of write back and forth and kind of build our little community from Starlog. And I remember just the craziest stories about it. The Empire Strikes Back. It was like, well, there's rumors about the Rolling Stones doing the theme song. It's just nutty, crazy stuff.
At the end of 1978, we got the Star Wars Holiday Special. I remember being so excited to see that, but the excitement started to dwindle as it went on.
I just remember you and I so excited to see that. And by the middle of it, we were like, so bored out of our minds. We were doing other things while we were watching it. And that's the kind of thing that didn't happen in the movie. That's the kind of thing that would happen to us all the time as kids, is you're so excited to see a movie or a cartoon, and literally halfway through it, you just lost interest. Where in the movie Star Wars, that never happened.
The highlight of the holiday special was the emergence of a character named Boba Fett, who made his first appearance in an animated sequence that was hidden in between everything else there. And I connected very much to that. In fact, I even drew up my own comic book based on that adventure. We didn't have VCRs then, so I had my cassette recorder that I put right next to the TV, and I recorded the entire thing. And so I sat there and transcribed every word from the holiday special so I could make a little comic book related to it. In the summer of 1979, there was a radio contest for the re-release of the original Star Wars, but this time it was going to be shown along with a special preview of The Empire Strikes Back. Well, there was one morning that I woke up kind of dejected, thinking people don't really win radio contests, do they? And I was on the phone and it said,
Sorry, you called too soon. You have to be the 7th caller.
Well, I decided to draw on my infant powers of the Force, and I remember closing my eyes and thinking about it and saying, okay, I'm going to get through this time. And when I did that, I actually did get through. The phone started to ring, and I won 2 tickets to this event.
You had won a radio contest from WABC, which gave you the greatest tickets that I wish they would have let us keep.
I know.
Because, I mean, they must have spent a lot of money on them or something, but they had the poster and everything. But I just remember, so we won those tickets, and it was a contest. There was a costume contest, and somebody showed up, and it was, I'm jumping a little bit around now, but we had already seen the Star Wars Holiday Special, right? That had already come out.
Yes.
Because somebody was dressed up, but we said, "Oh, are you supposed to be Boba Fett?" And they didn't know what we were talking about. But he just said he was dressed like a robot, but he looked a lot like what Boba Fett would look like. So
Luke Skywalker and Han Solo rescued the princess, destroyed the Death Star, but their story didn't end there.
The first time we see the trailer for Empire was during that radio contest, and I just remember I couldn't even think of the movie after that.
Now, the creators of the biggest smash hit of all time bring you the next episode in the Star Wars saga, The Empire Strikes Back.
All I was thinking about was the clips from the trailer we just saw, because everybody looked like they were just getting beat up or hurt or, because R2 was falling through a chute. Chewbacca had 2 arms. Luke was was hanging upside down, like everything you could, C-3PO was in pieces. Like you saw all of that in the trailer. So it was like everything you could think of looks like was happening to these kids.
Never realized that the trailer for Empire, which was so exciting, was narrated by, Harrison Ford before he narrated Blade Runner.
Coming to your galaxy next summer.
When we saw the Star Wars in the Los Astor Plaza, I had never heard sound like that before. So I just remember the scene where Luke and Leia are about to swing across. We were like shocked by the echo, but he says something. Oh, I just blasted it. You hear that echoing through. So the sound was amazing seeing it there, and that was like almost like a completely new experience.
There was a lot of promotional stuff for The Empire Strikes Back, and one were those phone messages where you could call and you could hear a message from Darth Vader, C-3PO, Luke, Leia, Han. And I mean, again, it was those this was our thing. And they were doing stuff for us.
Each time one of you on Earth calls this number, you will receive a message giving information on the continuation of the Star Wars saga, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, people called you Star Wars geek. Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, I can call up, and listen to Darth Vader. I mean, come on.
See it as The Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back. I've never looked forward to something cultural. No, we're not talking about looking forward to my wedding day or the day my children are born. Let's face it, that's somewhere else. But for something along this lines, for waiting to see your favorite rock group, your favorite artist, and waiting to see, I never looked forward to seeing anything more than The Empire Strikes Back.
About a month before The Empire Strikes Back opened, I happened to have been at a comic shop, and I spotted a magazine on the comic shop display that was the entire Marvel Comics adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back. Quickly scooped it up, bought it, went on the train, and I remember riding the train and not wanting anyone on the train to peek over and learn the secrets of what this movie was going to be. I held the comic book really closely to me. I didn't even want to read it on the train because I was afraid that if someone was strap hanging, they'd look over and find out some secret about The Empire Strikes Back that they shouldn't have known.
I had my high school biology teacher. So by 79 is when I had his biology class, and he was so into science fiction, this man, that he was talking about, before anything was revealed, that Luke Vader was Luke's father. Oh no, that can't possibly be. And the man was right. The man was. I couldn't believe it, and he was like, I "Told you." All those months later, in 1980, he was like, "I told you it was." I'm like, "How did you know that?" He says, "I've read a lot of books. I've read old school science fiction, lots of it. I loved it, ate it up for all my life."
No, that they kept that secret pretty well from me, but I was kind of on the fence. I go, "Man, this is Darth Vader. I think he's lying. That can't be."
I don't remember consciously not telling anybody. I don't remember consciously trying to keep it a secret, but I don't think I mentioned it to anyone.
In today's days, that would be more of a spoiler. You don't really want to spoil a movie before going to see it. But in those days, I felt better that I knew the story going into the film. And I always kept in the back of my mind that the comic adaptation was as close as possible, but it wasn't going to be exactly what the movie was. So I knew the movie experience would be different.
Empire Strikes Back opened up on a Wednesday. I did not have any tests that day at school. Went to Los Astor Plaza, got there at 6 o'clock in the morning. The movie, now that was a big deal in 1980, to get there 4 hours before a movie opened. And my high school friends had tests in the morning. And they're like, wait for us to come. When I came back to school, my mother wrote a note that very simply said, "Please excuse Mark from school yesterday. He went to see The Empire Strikes Back with my permission." Everyone laughed and signed it and accepted and said nothing, but I had a different biology teacher. And she's like, "But that's not acceptable. My mother said I can go. My mother excused me. That's enough for you."
I actually had tests to take during that week that Empire came out, so I was not able to go online early. The earliest I could go was that Saturday. I believe it was the 24th. At that point, the excitement in the audience was very high. A lot of people were anticipating this film. They couldn't wait to see what happened.
With Empire, I remember seeing that a lot of times in theater, and we saw it a lot of times together, but at that point I had moved, so there were a lot of times where I went and saw it with my friends. My father liked that one better than the first one, I remember, because first time we saw it, we stayed twice in the theater. But I remember Empire seeing a lot. And also with Empire, there was a lot of toys I always think about. I always think of the asteroid scene. That was my favorite part.
I loved Empire. The asteroid field was almost as mind-blowing for me at the time as the Star Destroyer was. Asteroid field was freaking fabulous back then. Like the flips and the Star Destroyers.
That was one of my favorite. That Empire is still my favorite movie. Over the years, everyone's that seems to be the answer now for everyone to say Empire is my favorite, but it wasn't at the time because a lot of people were mad that it was a cliffhanger.
The movie doesn't really end. It's sort of a cliffhanger designed in the style of the old Hollywood cliffhangers. And a few of my friends felt that way. They said, "How could you like that movie? It didn't even end. Didn't even have an ending."
It was not everybody's favorite movie. But I think now, probably in hindsight, people realize what a good movie it was because it set up it actually was what Star Wars would become. Like Star Wars A New Hope is definitely a first chapter of something, but Empire is really where that became kind of set up all the different worlds and opened it up a little more to some of the other creatures, and so there was a lot of world building in that one. There's a couple of things in my mind that I think about when I was a kid right away was when the Tauntaun was split open, and all the guts and stuff kind of come out of it, which is just a strange image, and when Vader's sitting in that chamber and the mask is being lowered onto his head.
Yes.
Like those were things that were like, wow, that was so weird. But with the Vader thing, I didn't think of him as being a human. And so when you saw that image with the mask being lowered on a human head, then you realize, there is, because I don't think when I saw the first movie, I ever thought once, what's under Darth Vader's helmet? Like I never even thought about it. Where now all of a sudden after Empire, you start to think, who is this person? What does he look like under there? A lot of that, a lot of thoughts about what Jedi was going to be.
I never expected the movie to be as good as it was, very exciting, very thrilling. It took you to worlds that you could probably never imagine, and took our characters into situations that you never would think that they would go through.
I believed Darth Vader, but I was agonizing over how. Like, wait a minute, what really happened here?
I actually found a journal that I had written around that time, and I said, Darth Vader has to be lying. It's not true.
Yeah, because it just didn't make sense.
That's the other interesting thing. Between reading the original novelization of the movie before seeing the movie, and then getting our hands on the comic, it didn't ruin it for us.
Yeah, because mostly people would talk about things when they leave movie theaters, and you would think that that would be like the main topic of conversation. But I don't think I really thought about it like when it, even though it's a big secret, I didn't really think about it as like a big deal for some reason.
Whenever there's a sequel to a movie, you usually expect there to be the same characters over and over again. And in this movie, we got introduced to 3 new characters that became beloved. There was Yoda. The first time I'd seen Yoda was in the comic book adaptation. It wasn't a very good likeness at all, but it gave an idea of what his character was going to be. I first saw his photo when I bought the album, again, before seeing the movie. Probably about 3 weeks before seeing the movie, I saw the album on sale, and I bought it. And the album came with a booklet of photos. And within it was this beautiful photo of Yoda. And I looked at it, and I listened to John Williams' sweet score that went with that, and I instantly felt a lot of empathy toward Yoda, this green creature. And I'd seen the credits and saw that Frank Oz was involved, and I knew Frank Oz from his Sesame Street and Muppet days. I was a big fan of the Muppets growing up as well. So it was a thrill to see that Frank Oz was actually involved in this film, and he was going to be puppeting this creature, and I couldn't wait to see what this thing looked like in reality. I went to a screening, I believe it was with one of my sisters, who said, the funniest part was that little man. How'd they put all that makeup on that little man? So she thought it was real.
And introducing Lando Calrissian.
How could we forget Lando Calrissian? Lando was a cool, roguish charmer. He was the coolest character to ever show up in Star Wars up to that point, other than Han Solo. And the other new character was Boba Fett, who we'd previously seen in animated form in the holiday special.
My first cosplaying situation is there was a youth party at church, and so my buddy had a girlfriend who, maybe she was Amish, I don't know, but she sewed clothes, and so she made the Princess Leia costume, she made the Luke costume for my buddy, and I rented, with $75, I'll never forget, the Darth Vader costume. And they had a Dawn Post helmet, and they had the ribbed shirt, and this guy made this box with these little lights that flashed on and off. It was the whole thing. So we rented it, and we played a scene from The Empire Strikes Back. And then we kind of had Darth Vader disappeared, but his lightsaber was still there.
Darth Vader was really becoming the supervillain of all time, thanks to Empire.
I think The Empire Strikes Back had inspired a lot of people to cosplay or to wear the costumes to the movie theaters. Mark used to do that. He had made this Darth Vader outfit out of material and had asked me to help him out with the chest plate. I had just taken a 3D modeling class in school, which showed you how to make things out of paper, and I made this really cool chessboard for him. He looked pretty impressive as Darth Vader. In fact, there were other times when he wore the Darth Vader mask as we'd see The Empire Strikes Back, and he attracted a large crowd of people who thought Darth Vader was making an appearance. In fact, I remember walking down the street with him. He was all dressed up as Darth Vader. We'd just gone to see the movie, and a car pulled up, and a father and a son came out of the car, and the father said, "Look, look, look. You know who that is? It's Batman."
For me, it was all about Chet. I mean, that was when I was fully invested. That's all I thought about was what was going to happen. It was all the wondering about, how is everything going to get connected? who was the other? Is the other, because Yoda says, no, there was another. And we kind of imagined that the other was going to be some, like a Mace Windu kind of showing up and saving the day. We wondered, would we get to see the Emperor? Because at that time you really didn't see the Emperor at all, except in that hologram, and you really didn't get a good view of him. How was Han going to get out? Is he alive? Or who would Leia end up with? Luke, Han. And is Darth Vader actually Luke's father?
Find out the answers to this and more next time on Before We Forget. If you enjoyed the show, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Listen to Rich on the Smashcuts podcast. Listen to Jeff Roney on Ride Along with Jeff and Colleen podcast. Thank you for watching, and we hope you come back for more of our Star Wars story.